I identify as Latino. I identify as gay. I identify as a brother of a person with a disability, as an immigrant. So I think those are my four main ones. There's like smaller ones that you could perhaps go into, but those are like the ones that always interconnect somehow. Um, so finding which one is the dominant one depends on the setting, it depends on the time of year, it depends on who I'm with. So it always changes, and there's always that intersectionality that is happening, right? So they're never quite separated from each other, but which one stands out might depend on where I'm at or who I'm with. Well, I grew up here in the States, but my family's from Guatemala. I came here when I was two. So this is all I know, but Spanish is still my first language. I grew up in a Latino community in Oakland, California, Fruitville Village area. So for me, that's all I knew at that point in life, and so it's always been a part of me. That looking back, though, it's always so interesting to see how it was rough growing up, but I didn't think anything of it because that was all I knew. And then now that I'm in a different state of life, it's kind of interesting just to see the differences in the reflection that you can create from that. But I think I'm grateful that I did have those experiences because I can appreciate what I have, or how if whatever amount of work that I've had to put in, it's a little bit more of a process that you can enjoy the result from it, versus not having those experiences or those struggles. You might not appreciate it, as much when you actually are stepping away from it. So I ended up at State just because it was local, and then I decided to. Well, at first I was majoring in graphic design, which at SF State was industrial arts was the formal title. But being, as I mentioned, one of my identities as a brother of a person with a disability, and that's my brother who has Down syndrome and is now 19. But growing up, I would always attend his IEP meetings, and so I was very involved. And one of his speech therapists, this was probably 2007, 8, when I was a sophomore going into junior year. She was asking me about my major, and so I told her graphic design, but she said, you should look into speech because you're a male and it's a primarily female profession. You're bilingual and you already have experience with your brother. So kind of three important aspects that are kind of like a shoe-in for you. And so I looked it up. She told me to look up communication disorders. Sometimes it's under speech language pathology, but there's different titles. And so SF State had it under communicative disorders. So all I had to do was really get a signature, switch majors, and it was perfect timing. Had I not done it in that moment, I would have had to wait another year to start the courses in the fall. So maybe it was meant to be, but it fell right on track of where I was in my college experience, and so it worked out. I took time off, and so I couldn't afford to go straight into grad school because that was going to be more expensive, so I had to work. And so, but after that time, I finally decided to go back and apply. And I took a 2-year break. So by then, you had also taken a break, right? And you were 1 year ahead of us.
When you're
so by then, it just made sense to go back to school. And so that's when I applied in 2011 or 2012. And I only applied at SF State because I was already familiar with it. It was local, and I got it. So it was hard in the sense that I didn't have someone to guide me through it. My parents had never gone through that, but it wasn't as hard as perhaps I would have thought maybe when I was younger. It was just a matter of I chose what was achievable for myself in terms of where I was, and location was very important. I knew that I couldn't go far because I was very involved with my family, especially with my brother. So location was kind of what determined where I applied, and then cost. So SF State was local. It's not as costly as a UC, so it just made sense. And so I think the entire process I went into it I had a particular end goal in mind, and that was to go to college and not worry about, is it the highest college, or if it's, a lower end, or if it had the name behind it or not. I just kind of had the end goal of getting a degree from a college. So I think going to these meetings, I wasn't responsible to translate as much as I would maybe in appointments, but because they could provide the translation. But I was always still tuning in because translating is a hard job to do. And it's not always easy to correctly interpret things. So I would listen. I said, well, no, that's not what either my mom meant or what I heard the district say. So I would sometimes jump in to clarify because I had heard something else. And so I think in that sense, I was advocating for, for my family, and that because I either knew what my mom was trying to say and it wasn't being translated correctly. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I don't think I had to translate like entire meetings, but I was still very involved. But that's all I knew, so it didn't really seem like it was second nature to me because that's what I grew up doing, right? As a Latino family, parents who don't speak. My dad is fluent in English, but my mom wasn't, and having grown up with her mostly and going to appointments with her and all that, like that's what I knew to do is to translate or to help, relay the message somehow. So it was just second nature. I mean, a lot of these things I feel like I'm very flexible. I think I've learned as I grow up. A lot of these things, like having my brother with Down syndrome, my older three brothers are back in Guatemala, so I never interacted with them. We're from a different dad, so it's almost like I was a single child. And so having my brother, that's all I knew. So I couldn't compare him to a typically developing brother. So I just adapted to what I had as a brother and what his characteristics were and how he behaved, and that was just like my normal. Same with grad school, like that just became my normal. It didn't seem like it never felt odd. It just was that's what it was, and I just went with it. So I think that's where I noticed I'm very flexible in some ways that whatever the situation is, I just try to go with it and not have it be such a I guess not overanalyze it because it's something that I could be doing naturally. So when I look back, I didn't even think of it that much. I mean, obviously it was noticeable, but I don't know. I think it also being gay also it plays into it. I think if I were a straight male, my reaction might have been different, right? So as a gay male, I think that played some role in me just being, going along with it and not thinking twice. CF, so I split my time between two jobs. It was a preschool job with Head Start programs, and then the other one was a private practice that focused primarily with individuals with autism and then a lot of early intervention. So I had a little bit of that year I had from like 18 months to almost like 18 years. So it was a pretty wide gap. A lot of early intervention with the preschoolers and the toddlers. And so that was a lot of energy that was required for that role, especially the toddlers. You have to be on for them,
and happy
and
positive.
As a very calm, more introverted individual, that took a lot of energy out of me because it's asking me to do the complete opposite of what I am naturally. So that was draining for me. And the private practice had long hours. So I would start sometimes at 7:38 and wouldn't be done until 6. It was a pretty long day. There were gaps in the middle if clients didn't show up. But overall, that first year was actually kind of. I mean, you're learning as you go as well. So that first year, it's a learning year, right? You're still trying to learn to be a therapist, and so it was a lot of work. And then splitting my time between the two was fun, but it was also made it so that I couldn't quite devote all of me to one job.
And you were commuting, weren't you?
And I was commuting. So I'm in the East Bay, and I was commuting both south and then northwest to San Francisco. So there's a lot of commuting. But I kind of enjoy that because I don't think I would enjoy being 5-10 minutes away from my job and just get there and be done. I would say 95% Spanish speaking, then 5% English dominant, whether they're African American, there was some Caucasian, but very, very few. So I think that was what was motivating about that job is that I was working with families that spoke Spanish as the first language. So I got to use a lot of Spanish there. And same with the private practice. The early intervention families that I got were all mostly Spanish-speaking families because no one else at the clinic was bilingual. So therefore, I got those clients. So I've been able to use a lot of Spanish throughout my years, which is great. Right? I mean, that was the goal, right? As a male who's bilingual, that was the goal of using it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now I'm at Redwood City, like we mentioned, and I am at a Spanish immersion school. So about 50% of the population is Spanish-speaking families or students, and then the other half is not. So the goal is for them to kind of interact with each other and learn from each other. Um, but they're learning Spanish as their primary academic language. So I get to use a lot of Spanish still, and I work with K through 5th. So it's the younger group. So and it's been pretty fun. So I've enjoyed that setting. I feel like I got really lucky with the staff is pretty supportive and open to collaboration and kind of feedback. The administration, for the most part, has been great. So I feel like I got really lucky with that setting.
Yeah.
I haven't done much AAC, so I think that was what I originally thought I would end up doing a lot of, and then I haven't. There was one summer that I did a summer position, and that was pretty much all AAC with all students with autism. So that was like a big like jump in the pool. You don't know how to swim, and you're gonna figure it out.
Dive in.
And it worked. You dive right in, and it was fine. It worked out, and so I learned a lot in those few weeks. So I would want to do more with AAC. Like my caseload right now, none of them use AAC, not at least any high tech. There might be like visuals and stuff like that, but nothing high tech. I do use it with my brother, but it's one individual that I know very well.
Mm-hmm.
So my experience with it is completely different than having to use it with many individuals that all have different needs.
Mm-hmm.
I would also want to do more assessments. That's something that I've always enjoyed doing, but maybe not just bilingual assessments, but just kind of branching out to other forms of assessments. So I think those two areas are the ones that are most piquing my interest. Although eventually I would want to also, being gay, I would want to work with an LGBT population. So with voice therapy, we work with people transitioning from male to female or female to male, and that would be something that I would want to tackle at some point. Because I feel like like I said earlier, like I try just to go with things and not to dwell on the negative. So I don't have a negative experience that comes to the top of my head. Luckily, I can say that, I guess, because otherwise that would be something that would create so much emotion. I'm sure that I want to speak to it. Positive, I think where I'm at, my setting, being a Spanish immersion program, that already kind of creates a very inclusive environment that I feel like I maybe wouldn't have if I was in a different setting where Spanish is not the academic language, because everyone at our site, well, 98% of the staff speak Spanish. So therefore, you're already part of that community. And if you speak Spanish, it's not looked down upon. I think that's been a positive experience, that if you are bilingual, that's what we want. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're searching for. So even with the substitutes that come in, we tend to try to have Spanish-speaking substitutes. So I think that's been a positive experience where what's the word? It's promoting. It's kind of pushing for that bilingual piece that sometimes doesn't always come naturally when you're in a different environment.
Yeah.
How do I say positive? For that, I think I was like building good relationship with my students is important. So that is what motivates me. That if I see them happy to come with me, if they're having fun, that's motivating to continue to have that cycle. Um, so you always want to make that progress happen, right? So you can't do that if they don't trust you, if they don't want to be with you. So when I see them react positive, that's always motivating, because it's telling me I'm doing something right. And building that student up is always important for me. So that's also what's motivating. Some students come in thinking, I'm dumb, I'm not smart. They've heard that from someone at some point. And so I always feel like part of my job is to make them know that they are capable of doing things. It might take different levels of work, different types of work, but they can get it. Um, so that's motivating to me. Seeing the progress is always motivating. Sometimes there's a plateau, and I get stuck in a rut, and I'm like, okay, what do I do different with this student? Mm-hmm. But once I see the progress, that's what's motivating. Okay, something finally worked. So I have a student who just qualified for speech and for K&G. She's first grade, so way behind, right? And I thought it was gonna be way harder to teach her the sounds, and even she like felt that way. So she did not. She was happy to come with me, but she did not want to practice those sounds that first session. And then once we got it, she's like, I could see just the light bulb hit, and so she came back, and after that weekend that she had been practicing, so now I already see the progress, and so that's motivating. It's like once you're able to like
So cute.
tap into a student and what they need to do, that's always like what kind of keeps a positive cycle going. In terms of refilling my cup, I think disconnecting completely from speech and language is what refills it. So like Instagram, I follow people that are, like on a grander scale of speech and language, but I also try to disconnect completely from it because that's not all I am and that's not all I do, and I can't be speech therapy 24/7 because that's too draining. So for me, like just doing completely different things is in order for me to recharge, I need to unplug completely. So whether it's spending time with friends, doing tennis, photography, happy hours, anything like that, I need to do that. I would say I stay true to yourself. I guess when I think back at those years, I struggled with um, who I was and what that meant for me, and kind of trying to please others. So I would say stay true to who you are and what makes you happy, and kind of be more selfish because I think I'm in the way that I'm flexible. I also try to please others and kind of keep the cool and peace, but that might not necessarily mean that I get to be happy about it. So I would say as I'm getting older, I'm more selfish, more like able to put boundaries and limits, whether it's at work and family, friends. So I would say start doing that earlier.